So, I'm back with part 3 for the Animanda on Titan series that I'm doing. I finished watching season 3, part 1, and then I'll do a separate video for season 3, part 2. Because, of course, season 3, part 1 ends with, all the scouts and everything ready to go off to go and, try to reclaim Shiganshina district so they can, of course, get into the basement. Which this leads up to a few other things. The season 3 part 1, of course, is kind of dealing with the fallout of finding out of who Historia is, which I've I kind I know how the series ends. I know how the manga ends, and probably might do slight elaborations on some things for the anime. And so, I know that Historia becomes queen and all of that, as I've mentioned before. But now I get a little bit more of a, retrospective of like, okay, so this is what happens. You may be wondering why Stuffle is back there. Stuffle is technically back there to represent Historia because Historia is very sweet and small and gentle, but she will hurt you if you hurt her or her friends. Um, we also start. So one of the other things that we also see in this season, in this part of the season, is Mikasa kind of having a bit more respect for Historia. At the end of the last season, with everything that happened with Emir, we have the moment where Mikasa basically tells Historia, "Is like I don't have anybody else that I care about. I have Aaron and I have Armin, and." I decided on everyone who matters to me, 5 years ago when everything happened in Shiganshina district, and I don't have any other heartstrings. You see some moments in this season where you do see that I think Mikasa does start to have a bit more respect for Historia. I don't know how much more Historia and Mikasa are going to interact throughout the rest of the season, throughout the rest of the series. You know, we know that Mikasa goes off and, sets up, she goes and she, lives near where she, buries Aaron's head and everything. So maybe Historia and Armin and some of the other scouts, former scouts, go and visit every now and then. Visit Mikasa and, pay respects to Aaron, maybe. Maybe that's what they do. I don't know. That's not something that's brought up, but I don't know. But one of the things, throughout the course of the season, at the beginning of the season, Historia is kind of getting over the fact of, she lost Amir. She lost one of the very few people in her life that has been kind to her. And of course, we learn through what she explains to the scouts, that that she grew up on this farm. She her mother was there, and she lived with her mother and her grandparents, and her mother never spoke to her, never did any work, just sat and read under a tree for all day long, and then would some nights a very nice carriage would come and pick her up, and she would be in nice clothes, and she would go into the city for the night and then come back. And Historia, as a kid, she just thought that, I guess, that she thought that that was normal. I would assume that her grandparents maybe showed her some form of affection. I mean, she did, she's on this farm. She's supposed to stay within the farm. I saw on one of the Attack on Titan Wikipedia for the actual series, or it like breaks down everything for the series. I saw someone make a comparison between Historia is a comparison for the Eldians that are within the walls. She's not supposed to leave the farm. The Eldians aren't supposed to leave the walls or the safety of Paradise. She she has kids that are mean to her, like the way that that will attack her. If she either leaves or throw rocks at her if she tries to leave, or from over the fence. And those are representations of the Titans. And then, of course, we find out about her sister, her half-sister, Frida. We also learn quite a bit about the Reese family in this section of the anime and in the manga, of course, the corresponding chapters in the manga. We, of course, if you've seen Attack on Titan or read Attack on Titan, then you all know this anyway, but, this is my perspective on it, and if you find this interesting, then I hope you at least enjoy the video. Or at least my commentary on things of, really, people? But, we find out about the Reese family and how that they are actually the ruling family. We get a little bit more of the history of the walls inside Paradise, which I don't think that they've actually referred to themselves as the Eldians up to this point. I don't think up to that point we've actually heard that name referred to them as. I don't think we find out about that name until the end of season 3 or the corresponding section of the manga, or we find out what's in the basement. And we may, I don't 100% remember when they find out that they were called the Eldians and that is their race and that they're the ones that can turn into Titans. By this point in time, they figured out that, oh yes, humans can turn into Titans. It's not just Eren and, Annie and Bertolt and Reiner. Ymir, Eren had, maybe mentioned to them that Eren gave Hodge a conversation that he had seen Bertolt and Ymir have when they were captured about, do you remember who you ate? And no, and you had been a Titan for 60 years or so. And we get kind of a glimpse into what the mind of a Titan is. We got this a little bit in regards to Ymir when she would mention that it just felt like a nightmare, a never-ending nightmare that she couldn't wake up from until she, unfortunately ate, yeah, until she ate, the previous holder of the Jaw Titan, and then she became the Jaw Titan. We see that, that Hodge has kind of determined between what they think the Titan is, that's Connie's mother, which of course she is, that she can't really move, so it's not like she can really hurt someone unless they get close enough to her. I think Connie mentions later in the season, or near the end of the season, part 1 of the season, that it's like the day before they're going to be leaving, so he's like, well, I'm going to go and visit my mom again, go to the village and see my mom, and all of that, and like Hodge has been probably, as I mentioned in the last video, probably not torturing this Titan the way that she did to, the 2 previous ones that they had captured, because at that point in time, they hadn't realized that the Titans were former humans, that there are people that have been changed into Titans. We don't actually see Connie go and visit the village, but we get some flashbacks of, her, Hodge and Connie and Levi explaining to the rest of the group, that the main group, of course, that, yeah, no, we think that Titans used to be humans, and that somehow they got turned into Titans, and we don't know how. And Connie's like, do you think we'll ever be able to change my mom back? And I mean, by technicality, if Connie's mom's Titan ate Eren, she would be able to turn back, or if she ate Annie, she would be able to turn back into a human. Same thing if she ate Reiner or Bertolt, which I know the Bertolt thing comes in later, later on, and probably near the end of season 2, because I know stuff happens with Connie and Bertolt and Armin. And I know that part of what happens there is how Bertolt, how Armin ends up becoming the Colossal Titan. But that's for the next video. But Connie, of course, wants to find a way to turn his mom back, and yeah, I would assume that now at this point in time, Hodge isn't like torturing Connie's mom. She might still be doing some of the vague experiments that don't involve actually torturing her, like like depriving her of sunlight to see if she'll fall asleep during the day, and different things like that. Stuff that's not really going to hurt the Titan, because she doesn't want to hurt it now that she knows that it's Connie's mom, B, a human anyway. So we have that. I would assume that they're not feeding it. That would not be a fun thing to do. Well, we got all these scout corpses. How about we don't do that? But, we learn more about the founding Titan in this part of the season. Of course, we learn that the Reese family has been having has had the founding Titan inside of their line, passing down from one true king within the walls to the next. We know that we learn about the the first king of the walls, who of course we learn later on is the 145th king, I think, of the Eldian Empire, of the Fritz line, that he had, he had come to the walls, and he built the walls. Um, don't exactly explain the fact that there's titans inside all of the walls at this point in time, but it's we built these walls. He built all the walls, the three walls, Maria, Sheena, and Rose, and have all of the people inside of the walls. We get vague references to, of course, the Western culture, or or it wasn't. I don't remember if it was the Western culture or the Eastern culture, but it's the Asian culture that kind of came and settled on the island. And of course, Mikasa's mother was a descendant of one of them, and so was Mikasa, of course. And then of course we learn about the Ackerman line quite a bit. But first, I'll finish up what kind of where we learn about the Fritz line up to this point. We learn that the king built the walls and brought everybody there, and that he then used the power of the founding titan inside of himself to manipulate everybody's memories to make them forget what was in the outside world. And that because the Ackermans couldn't be manipulated by this, and that the Asian tribe, if that's what they're referred to as, couldn't be manipulated by this because they're not the same bloodline. And of course, we learn more about the Ackerman bloodline later on. We know that they're Titan science, but that's not explained at this point in time yet. But, we learn that, the king used his power to manipulate everybody's memories, and to, try to keep them inside of the walls, of course. And then that, that king started a new, put in a fake royal family, which is still called the Fritz family. And there's, the fake king that, we learned about, the fake king, the figurehead king that doesn't actually have any power. And then we learn that there's a bunch of these different noble houses that are actually kind of in charge of the country. And then of course we know that we learn, as I said, that the real royal family is the Reese family, because the former King Fritz, changed their name and made them the Reese family instead of the Fritz family. And that, that line went down the line, and there was, Aaron is currently the holder of the founding titan, which I'll get to. His father had it for a short amount of time, but the previous holder before him was, of course, Frida, who was, as I mentioned, 10 minutes ago, whatever, is, Historia's older half sister, and that she was like the only one that was kind to Historia the whole time that she was growing up. As I said, we don't really know about her grandparents, about Historia's maternal grandparents, but her Frida would come and visit them on the farm. She was, in like the lands that were owned by the Reese family. She would come and visit Historia. She taught Historia how to read. We see Historia reading this book about, a very selfless girl whose name was Krista, which of course we learn later on is, what they changed the name to of, Amir, as in Amir Fritz, which, we learn later on is part of that story. This is where we start getting glimpses of that a little bit. And that she would, manipulate, that Frida would manipulate Historia's memory whenever she would leave, so Historia wouldn't remember that she was there. She would still remember that, she learned how to read, and she learned how to read herself, because we get two dichotomies of this. We have it where she first tells the scouts about, I learned how to read, and I one time, and then I learned that, the relationship that I had with my mother wasn't a normal relationship, and I tried to hug her one day, and she pushed me away, and it was the only reaction that she ever really got out of her mother. And then like her mother had said something horrible to her own child of, I wish I had just, basically for all intents and purposes, her mother basically says, I wish I had just killed you when you were a baby, or I wish that you had never been born, or, whatever the case was. And we, of course, learn later on that this is because her mother, I think her mother's name was Alma, had been, a maid to the Reese family, and that she had fallen in love, or at the very least, Rod Reese had fallen in love with her, who is, of course, Historia's biological father, um, Frida's father as well. That Rod Reese had fallen in love with her, at the very least, fallen into lust with her, and she, she probably had quite a few nice things and everything, and she lost this very nice job at the the Reese estate, and now she has to live on this farm, and she has to look at this daughter every day that like caused her this problem, and she can't be with the man that she loves. She can't be in kind of, I'm assuming, like this life of luxury that I'm assuming she thinks she deserves, as the fact that her, had she been able to hide the fact that either Historia was Rod's father, or that she'd been able to just make it appear that like Historia, or that Rod was Historia's father, sorry, or hide the fact that she was Historia's mother, and then try to pass Historia off as the daughter of like Rod's actual wife. I don't remember what his actual wife's name was, because Rod had several children. Frida, being the one that took up the power of the founding Titan and had to devour her own uncle, which I'm like, yeah, that's a fun thought. And we learn that there's this ritual that gets passed down, that Frida, when it came time, when I think it was it Yuri? I think it was Yuri Reese that was Rod's brother. That he had the founding Titan power. That he had inherited it from their father. He had eaten their father and taken that power instead of having Rod do it. And we of course learn that Rod is a complete and utter coward throughout the course of this part of the season, because he could have very easily taken up the, instead of trying to make Historia, because, he has Historia and Eren kidnapped, and he, has them taken to this giant crystalline cave type thing made of all these crystal, it's armor, type pillars and everything, hardening type pillars all over the place. And, he takes them there, and he has them underneath this church and like in the sanctuary room. And he's got Eren like, chained to the walls and everything on this, platform. And he and Historia, he takes us, he's explaining to Historia, and he's kind of working off on the idea of like, well, she's never really had any type of relationship with me, and if I can convince her to do this, then I don't have to do it myself, and we can still retain our power as the ruling family. And I think part of him is kind of happy to see Historia, because we learn that 5 years ago, back when when Wall Rose fell in Shiganshina, that he had that this is we learn via flashbacks with this and flashbacks that Eren had, because when Rod and Historia both touch Eren, because that's royal blood touching where the founding Titan is, it allows all three of them to see these flashes. This is when Historia remembers everything about her sister, about Frida, and how nice Frida had been to her, and how kind and everything that she was, and how much she loved Frida, and how much Frida loved her. And Eren gets these glimpses of memories from his father, and he realizes that his father had come there, that when the walls had fallen, when Wall Rose fell, that Grisha, Eren's father Grisha, had made his way to the chapel, somehow found his way to the chapel. I'm assuming he probably did a lot of investigating and found his way there. And he had the attack Titan at that point in time. This is where we first learned kind of about that in Eren's history. And we learn a bit more about Grisha's history too. But he became the attack Titan, and he squashed the rest of the Reese family, and he fought Frida's founding Titan, but she didn't have a whole lot of battle experience, so he was able to easily defeat her and, rip out her spine and eat her. And of course, then he gained the power of the founding Titan. And then, so Eren kind of has it going through his head. It was like, my father took this power from your family, and he seems perfectly okay with the fact of Historia eating him. With, Historia turning herself into a Titan and then, eating him so that way she can regain the power from him that was, that belonged to her family. Because that's what Rod wants her to do. And Rod's kind of like guilting Aaron into this and, making Aaron think that, oh no, you have to do this because, your father took this power from us and everything. And, he explains the story. Well, if you do this, then you can use this power to, to destroy all the Titans outside of the walls. And, we do have this moment where it's, he gives her the syringe with the serum in it that's supposed to allow her to be able to turn into a Titan, and then she can eat Aaron and, then, regain the founding Titan's power. But we also learn about kind of the first hints of, the first king's curse. That Frida had before she had taken on the power of the founding Titan, she had wanted to use that power to destroy all the Titans outside of the walls to stop that. And, Rod and his brother, Yuri had, begged their father to, change that, to, stop all the Titans and to, so they could be free and everything because they knew about that power from him. And, every royal member of the line that, every royal blooded person that has that power from the founding Titan is unable to do anything because it goes against the first king's will. And he, that's kind of when the first king kind of shows up and they get that weird starry thing in their eyes. And, they can't do anything. They can't, they can't go against that part of that order that was still there, which is kind of BS, if you ask me, because you would kind of think that if like how strong was this guy's will that, years, several, Frida, Yuri, their father's father, or however many others between then and now over the past 100 years, 106, 107, whatever years since the walls were built, and, it maybe got passed down the first time, how strong was that king's will? I mean, obviously, we learn later on that he had, he abandoned part of the Eldian culture that was living on the mainland and moved so many to the islands and to Paradise. And we learn about that and everything, later on. But I mean, just in and of the context of what we see here, this, he was obviously a pacifist, and that unfortunately part of that did get passed down through the curse. And I just like, how strong was this guy's will in regards to being able to prevent it, even like, 6, 7, maybe 8 or whatever, carrier, holders of this founding Titan power later, even with like if they had a very strong will of themselves, Frida was able to, she used her power to still be able to go and visit Historia and everything, and she, but she was still subjected to it. It's like if like someone had a strong enough will to be able to, surpass that power, would they have, if someone of royal blood had a strong enough will to be able to surpass that curse, would it have been broken? And would they have been able to, actually, use their power to, control the Titans outside of the walls and, maybe not necessarily turn the people back right away, but maybe be able to make the Titans stop attacking humans so much so they can, the humans in the walls can get more resources and so they're safer. I don't know if I'm the first person to come up with this thought or not. Given how long Attack on Titan's been out and how long that kind of concept has been out in regards to the founding Titan and, even what we learned about the Fritz line later on, with Amir Fritz's backstory and everything, you would think that maybe someone with a strong enough will would have been able to surpass that. If they are royal blood and have a strong enough will, I would say Historia has proven to have a pretty strong will. Maybe not necessarily enough to be able to stand up to the first kings or the 145th kings, whatever, his rule, but his curse, but maybe it's like oh, what was it? Isayama had said in um a Q&A or something like that, that someone had asked him, well, if someone was born of like royal blood and Ackerman blood, would that person, what would that be? And because we learned about the Ackermans in this season because we meet Kenny Ackerman. We haven't learned that Levi is an Ackerman yet at this point in time. We kind of get hints of that, of course, throughout the course of the season, and then Levi learns that he's an Ackerman from Kenny. And Kenny Ackerman used to be known as Kenny the Ripper because he had used to kill MPs, because we learned that the Ackerman line had originally been kind of like bodyguards to the king, and the 145th king, or the first king of the walls, had, because he couldn't control them, he sent them into exile, and made the line be persecuted. And of course, this is kind of where we start to learn about, like, there's like an undercity, an underground city underneath the walls, which, you'd think, you'd think that would be a little more of a safer place, because I don't know if Titans can dig, but, maybe there's a digging Titan somewhere. Maybe not not like maybe like one of the 9 Titans, but like maybe there's a digging Titan somewhere. Although I guess technically any of the 9 shifter Titans would technically be able to dig. In regards to, we're gonna dig for a while, and then bury something or dig under something, maybe. But so they're under the walls. There's that underground city area that we learn about, and that's where Kenny grew up. And we learn that that is where Levi grew up. And we learn that, Kenny had been, he slaughtered a whole bunch of these MPs, and that, now he's kind of in charge of this, personnel control squad or whatever. And he's one of the people that was trying to kidnap, Aaron and Historia. He's the one that was in charge of that. And we get a few more glimpses into some kind of a little bit of like the day-to-day type stuff for the people, because we have a moment where, way back in season 1, when the district is attacked by the Colossal Titan the second time, when the scouts have to fight him, there's that, it's not the Reese family, I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was one of the merchants that had been blocking the gate to get everybody out, and Mikasa came along, and she, killed a Titan before it could get to all of them, and she just kind of, threatens him, and, get everybody to get out, so that way they're all safe, because she doesn't want to see other people end up the way that she did, the way that her and Aaron and Armin did. And so there's that moment, but we also have, we learn that later on, he came back into the Trost district. I think it was the Trost district was that one. He comes back to that, and he started to build up the district more, use his resources to help make the district better. And, and he had a son that was helping him, and he came from a very well-to-do merchant family, and he was building it up more. And what ended up happening was, he kind of ended up trying with kidnap Aaron and Historia. And then, the the scouts kind of force him to help them, and he unfortunately gets killed by the Levi's squad, or not Levi's squad, gets killed by Kenny's squad. And his son, who we learn his son's name is, I think it was Fuegel, ends up getting chased at various points, and then Haas shows up and helps him. And then between him and her, they're able to get a confession out of a bunch of these MPs about the fact that, with all these witnesses around that are in the Trost district at the time, that, they have respect for this family, because they came and they tried to help them and tried to help rebuild their homes and their district and everything. So they weren't, people weren't starving, people weren't cold and homeless and everything. And that, this guy, Fuegel, helps Hodge, of course, Hodge, get the confession out of these MPs about, that they're supposed to try to kill him to, keep him quiet. And so we get that, and then of course we learn that there's, kind of suppression of the press in this series, in this world, because we have this reporter that's talking to the kind of the head MP, And he's like, well, we won't mention, that, this stuff or this stuff in the article. And the other reporter's like, well, the other younger reporter's like, wait, why wouldn't we do that? And the older one's like, I'll make sure, tells the MP, it's okay. I'll just make sure that doesn't end up in the article. It's fine. He's like, this guy's still learning the ropes. It's fine. I'll teach him the right way of doing things around here for the way that things are supposed to work. So I'm like, yeah, well, we got suppression of the press. That's kind of maybe something that you wouldn't think about right off the bat. But Isayama did. Um, and so we get those moments, and then of course we have the subplot with, well, not subplot, but what's going on with Erwin. And we find out a little bit about Erwin's history, that his father had been a teacher, and that his father had at one point had kind of taught him that there was stuff behind the walls, that this other everything that we've been explained to us doesn't necessarily always make sense with what we've been taught for our history from behind the walls. And of course, we learn that Erwin's father had been killed when Erwin was a child, because he asked the wrong questions, and Erwin kind of blames himself for that. So he wants to find out about, what's going on, what the real history is. I am unfortunately aware of the fact that Erwin does not get those answers, because he dies when they're trying to retake Shiganshin district, if I remember correctly. Unfortunately. But we learn, of course, that and Erwin is kind of under house arrest, and he talks to Pixis, and he explains to Pixis that they want to perform a coup because they've learned that that the scouts and the military kind of want to do a coup because they've learned that A, the king is false, B, that there's all these other problems that are going on that the nobles don't care about because it doesn't affect them, and as long as they're still living in comfort, then they don't care. They don't care if the Titans attack the next district because there's still more in this district to keep them safe. These next section of the walls and everything inside Wall Sheena. And what ends up happening is, Erwin talks to Pixis, and then they talk to some other people, and Erwin kind of explains, well, we kind of want to pull off a bit of a test. And like, he even gives Pixis an out. He's like, because he's going to get reprimanded in front of the king and probably executed. And they even build the whole platform where Erwin's supposed to be executed for his crimes, because they're going to disband the scouts. And, we have Erwin brought before the king, the false king, and the nobles, and Rod Reese is not there. He's off trying to get Historia to become a Titan and eat Eren, and the rest of the scouts are working on trying to get Erwin information, but also get find where the Reese's farm is, where their land is, so they can go and get Eren and Historia back before anything else happens. So we've got kind of two-pronged thing, and then we've got Kenny dealing with in the background, of course. And, we learn, of course, that, Kenny, I'll go over Kenny in a minute, but, I'll finish with Erwin and the coup. But he kind of gives Pixis an out. He's like, well, I want to give the lords kind of a test, the nobles a test. And if you don't, if you're okay with their answer, then so be it. I will be the martyr, and I will, be hung and take whatever punishment. But if they fail the test, as in, like, you think that they did fail this test, as coming from kind of an outsider point of view, he's not a scout. Pixis is part of the garrison, which is more the ones that are like on top of the walls defending it, I think, specifically. And the scouts are the ones that go out, of course, and fight the Titans. And then we have the MPs and everything that are, the police and everything. But we have where, Erwin, of course, brought before the king and all the nobles and a bunch of the other, regiment leaders from the garrison and everything, and Pixis is there. And Erwin is on his knees, and of course, at the end of the last season, Erwin lost an arm, unfortunately. And Erwin is, before them, and he's like, well, what if Wall Sheena was attacked now? Or what if Wall Mario was attacked now? And all of these, all of the people had to come flooding in here. There's not enough food. There's not enough resources to keep everybody going for, more than maybe a couple of days to a week at most before we would run out of rations and supplies. and then it would delve into basically an internal civil war, like a war zone inside of this last remaining wall, and it would be humans versus humans instead of humans versus Titans. And people would become a lot more desperate. People would be much more, they'd be more willing to fight because it's much more of their livelihood. And they'd turn against the king, they'd turn against the nobles, they wouldn't care because they're just trying to make sure that their families are safe and that their families have food and a place to sleep. And it's going to be the residents versus the refugees. And even with using the underground city and everything, there's still a lot of problems that would come with that. And so Erwin gives them that line, and the four nobles, and then you got the king in the background who's just like sitting on his throne, like looking kind of lordly, but he just looks bored. We find out later that he's like asleep, and he's actually just completely doesn't do anything, um, which is just kind of funny. He's there as a mouthpiece. But like we have the nobles are there, blah 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 blah, like they're stating these charters about you're not supposed to do something that's like against the good of humanity and everything, like these stupid charters type thing. And Erwin even had a line earlier, and I don't think it was that episode or if it was the previous episode, but he's like, yeah, the only way that humans will ever stop fighting is if it's down to one or less, because even if you have two people, you know there's only enough food for one of them, they'll still fight until one of them's dead. And then, and even if even if every single person on the planet died and you're the only one left, unless you're a very, very skilled person, you're not really going to be able to survive very long, unfortunately. And, Erwin's concept, and, Erwin had it planned, or like he probably planned it with Pixis to just have this be part of the test. If I'll do this type of speech type of a thing for like my last words, trying to explain that we still need the scouts, that the scouts are part of humanity's spear to be able to protect themselves as opposed to just the shield, which is like walls. And one of the other, after Erwin gives his speech and the nobles blow hot air. And then we have where one of, I think it's like one of Pixis's subordinates runs in, and she's like, well, Maria, wall Maria, or whatever, has been breached by the armored titan, just like the last time, or the armored titan and the colossal titan, just like the last time, and, blah, 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 are going to flood in here. And the nobles, like, they don't even flinch. They're like, close all of the gates. We don't need anybody coming in here. Just close the gates. So it's just, everybody that's already supposed to be in here is in here. And that moment is, I think, when Commander Pixis does decide that, these guys are worthless because they're willing to sacrifice, whatever in regards to do this. And, because he wanted to get their genuine reaction. And I mean, like, I think Erwin would have been, like, if the nobles had said, well, get all the gates raised, get everybody in here, we'll, worry about everything else later, but get them all in here and everything, and, send out the whatever to deal with the Titans. Erwin may have at least been able to be like, okay, well, they're not going to sacrifice the others just to do that. And, then he would have been okay with, like, Pixis still staying on their side, with the garrison staying on their side. But of course they don't. They pick the selfish road. And, they pick the selfish road, and then, Erwin, Pixis sides with Erwin, and then they bring in the I guess, like, the supreme commander of, like, all the garrison and the MP and the scouts. And they bring him in, who I cannot remember his name, but they bring him in, and he's like, okay, no. Y'all just failed. No Titans actually just attacked. Y'all failed this test. And now now this is going to be military rule. All y'all are going to prison. Your fake king is going to prison. All you nobles are going to prison. And we're going to, like, purge all the ones that have been nothing but entirely loyal to you for the past however many years and done everything you said without blinking an eye, just because of the fact of your nobles, and it wasn't something that was actually good for everybody else. And yeah, so we have those moments. And and they take over, and Ervin's free, and Ervin and this gets reunited with Levi and Hodge, and they head off to with the rest of the scouts. They head to go and find where they go to the Reese estate, and this is where Aaron is. He's chained up, and he's the other scouts are kind of on the run for a little while, so it's kind of funny. It's just like, okay, nope, everything's fine now. Ervin's fine. We're all gonna go save Aaron now, and they head off to do that. And Aaron's chained up, and Historia has the syringe, and she's ready to inject herself, like her father wanted, and then she just kind of I think it was remembering what Amir said to her. One of the things that Amir said to her, right before Amir turned into her Titan form in front of them for the first time. And Amir, that you have to be happy with who you are or whatever. And Historia just no, she knocks her father aside, and she throws the syringe on the ground to shatter it. And she's like, no, if you think it's such a great power to have this power of a god, then why don't you take it yourself? Because, Rod Reese is a coward. Um, he's a coward, very much a coward. And, we have in the background, we have, Kenny's squad of like these elites that he's specifically trained fighting against the scouts inside this like crystalline cave area that's like underneath the Reese estate, and they're all fighting there. And Hodge unfortunately gets injured, but they get her out, and she's okay. And we get a couple of other people that we have to fight. And like Kenny at one point had been, because Kenny's trying to gather information on this Titan form, this founding Titan, this power, and he had even tried to get at that, get at that, like Aaron should have to fight Historia, and then whichever one is actually the better one is the one that gets the power. And he like cut a gash across Aaron's forehead, not like a deep gash where it's not like he's gonna like bleed to death from this, but facial wounds usually end up involving a lot of blood, but it looks worse than it actually is. So like he cut across Aaron's forehead, so Aaron's like bleeding, like covering Aaron's eyes, which is like, I've got blood in my eyes. This hurts. Suck it up, wimp. That'd be like Kenny's answer. Suck it up, wimp. But he tries to get that to work, and that's when Historia, shatters the syringe and knocks her father away. And Kenny's like, I think Kenny's in his head thinking, okay, I like her. She's good. I like her. She's got guts. She's got more guts than Rod ever did. And we learn a little bit more about why he's able to work for the Reese family, even though the Ackerman family had been, kind of for all intents and purposes, shunned and ostracized, and just horribly treated by the royal family and by the people on Paradise in the walls. And what ends up happening is, Historia grabs the keys, and she runs up, and she's, trying to untie Aaron and unchain him and everything, so that way they can get out of there. And Rod's on the ground, and he just like crawls over to where like the syringe stuff is laying on the ground, and he does something extremely, extremely stupid. He licks it. And of course, that's when we get the moment of him starting to change into this gigantic, it's gigantic, a normal Titan inside this cave. And this is when the Levi and his squad shows up, so the scouts show up, and like they're getting Aaron unchained and everything. And Aaron's kind of at the point in his mind right now where he's just like, I just don't deserve to live. This power needs to go to Historia. I can't do anything. I couldn't help protect us. Blah 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 blah. And he, I don't know why that would require me laughing. But the others are there, and they're getting Aaron all unchained and unhooked, and they're kind of all backed into a wall. And Aaron, he's like trying to tell everyone to leave, but it's like, we're not leaving you. And like Historia done the soul speak, it was like, it was like, screw it, I may be humanity's enemy, but I'm not your enemy. I'm still your friend, type of a thing. And it was like, I don't want to watch you die. I don't want to do this. And just screw it if the rest of humanity dies. And I'm like, she got a little caught up there, yeah. But she does all of that, and the scouts show up and they help unchain Aaron, and they're all backed up against this wall of the crystalline cave while Rodriguez's gigantic titan is still forming, because I think it ended up being, what was that height, like 120 some, I think, meters high was, I think, of what it ended up being. And it was like the largest titan that any had like ever existed. And like, yeah, that's a giant titan. And they think it was a combination of like, he has royal blood, and those with royal blood tend to be bigger titans, but he also, he didn't inject it into himself, he licked it up. So that may have affected the way that it, interacted with his body, because it wasn't a very stable titan. But there, like Mika says there, and who else was there? Connie and Levi and Sasha, I think, were there. I think Jean was there too. I don't remember, but like they were there, like they're getting Aaron out, and Aaron's like, well, I got to do something to try to help them, and he grabs this vial that's labeled armor, and he bites it as he runs, and he transforms into his attack titan. But he also is like covered in armor, and he uses that as a way to, protect the rest of the squad behind him, and so they don't get crushed by like all the falling debris from when Rodriguez's giant titan breaks through the ceiling of this cave. And so he's now, that titan's roaming off on its own with its like face into the dirt, moving it. Well, considering how long it actually takes to get to where it's aiming, it doesn't actually move very fast, I guess, in comparison to its size. But it's like its chest is way too big for it to stand up on its own, because its arms and its legs aren't strong enough to be able to lift it up, and it's like running itself along the ground and giving off that large amount of steam and heat and everything, so it's setting different things on fire. And Aaron gets pulled out of the armored titan now type thing, his armored titan corpse that is not disappearing at this point in time, which is useful for what they need. And he is, he's pulled out of that, and he sees what's going on around him, and he sees that his friends are okay, and they all get out, and then they have to go and they have to deal with this giant titan. And they come up with the idea of, okay, well, it's going to be aiming for this area, so if this specific area is where it's heading for, we've got all this other stuff, we're ready to fight it. They get like all these explosives ready and everything, and they're trying to get the people to safety and everything, so that way the titan doesn't actually hurt anyone. And so it's it's the garrison working together with the scouts, and and Historia is like, well, they basically explain to Historia is like, well, we performed a coup, and your family is kind of no longer in power, and we know that the coup will only last, that the military being in charge will only be accepted for so long, so we're going to need you to come in and take your place as queen. And she's like, I understand. And she's like perfectly fine with this. She's like, I understand that, but let me do one last thing while my life is still my own, before I do this, before I become queen. Admittedly, if Historia dies, they really don't have any other way of continuing on the royal line, because, well, at this point in time, they don't know there's another way of carrying on the royal line for royal blood. I mean, we learn, of course, later on that, Aaron's half-brother Zeke, Grisha's other son, has royal blood. But there's not really any other royal blood running around, unfortunately, to be able to help with controlling the founding titan. And, what ends up happening is Historia is like, well, you're going to need something to rally the people behind. And if I'm involved in trying to take down this titan, and if I'm the one that, does this killing blow, and she's like talking to Erevin, she's like, if I'm the one that does this, then it's going to give the people something to rally behind, and we can use that. And he's like, well, I'm not exactly in any position to stop you She's also like, this is also like the first fight that I've ever had with my parents. First fight I've ever had with my father. And of course, they get ready, and the attack, the a giant abnormal titan gets to the wall, and it's looking over the wall, and like it ran, it's like it like eroded away so much of its face to the point where it's like if you like took my face and went like you like see what it would look like, and that would be disgusting, and it's just horrible to look at, and like it's like all of its organs are like falling out. I don't know if that's because like it was running on the ground so much that it messed with that, and like it just hasn't regenerated enough because it was causing too much damage all at the same time. But they get it, Aaron at one point kind of like beats himself up because he's like because he's just like trying to get his head back in the game, basically. Which we have a chance to protect this area here. We have a chance to make things better. We have a chance to try to get our people back on their feet, and then go into Shiganshina district and get everything out of the basement that we needed that was from your father, and all of that. So it's like, but we need to get past this first. And Aaron basically kind of needs to, beat some sense into himself, which he does. And then, the Titan is there and it's trying to go over the wall. And, Aaron changes into his attack Titan form, and they have it, kind of pinned, and it's, it's got its mouth. Well, its mouth couldn't really close anyway, but, they throw all these, Aaron throws all these explosives, these barrels full of probably like gunpowder or whatever into its mouth, and that makes it just kind of explode down the whole thing. Like all of the pieces start, pieces of hopefully the neck start falling down from the sky, and the scouts start, zipping through with their, their ODM gear, and they're, slicing all of the different pieces open, trying to find the nape. And Historia, like they hadn't seen Historia, but she comes running in, and she's, jumping around, and she's the one that, of course, that like slices the nape open, and is the one that kills, does the final blow to it to end her father. And she's the one that does that, and then she lands on this cart, and we have, all these people, they're looking at her, and she's like, I'm Historia Reese. I am the true ruler of the walls, the true queen of the walls. And so she proclaims that, and they cheer for her, and there was like, did you just take down that titan, blah 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 blah. And she's like, yes. So it's like her and the military working together, and she's of course the one that did actually do the final blow. She probably tried to convince everyone. It's like, well, even if I'm not the one that does the final blow, you have to at least tell everyone that I was, or else they're not going to rally behind you, behind me. And then of course we cut to a couple of days, weeks, whatever later, and Historia is is crowned queen of the walls, and she has the support of the military behind her. She has the scouts and the garrison and the MPs and everything behind her, and I love what they do, because at one point she's they're walking through the halls, and it's probably like a couple of days maybe or so after the after what happened after the coronation. I was gonna say inauguration. That's wrong. After the coronation, and she had made the comment that was like at some point, like earlier, she had made the comment of like, I want to punch Zeke, or like someone had told, no, not Zeke, Levi. She was like, someone told her that like you should punch Levi, for whatever the reason was, I don't remember. But she's like, they're walking down the halls, and she's got like the rest of the scouts that are with her and everything, and they're like, you really don't have to do this. It was a joke. Like trying to convince her, it's like, you don't have to try to punch Levi. And Levi had gotten his closure with his uncle. He had not known that Kenny was his uncle. Kenny got very badly injured when, Rod transformed, and Levi found him after the fact. And, Kenny explains, Kenny's having flashbacks, and he explains, I don't remember if he specifically explains to Levi, or if he just is having the flashback in his own mind, where he's like, well, I had gone to try to kill the king, the actual king from the Reese family, and he ended up becoming friends with him after he saw the way that he acted, and even, Yuri Reese at the time, had bowed, this king that he had just seen change into part of this Titan to protect himself and his brother, and, Rod's there, and Rod's ready to shoot Kenny, and, Levi or Kenny and I think it's Yuri is his name, or Yuki. I don't remember exactly, but he's there, and they become friends, and he becomes like his personal bodyguard, and he watches Yuri do these speeches about peace and harmony and being pacifist and everything to the small group that actually knows that the Reese family are the royal family. And Kenny's watching off in the background and everything, and he just wonders, like, if he had that power, would he feel that same way? So basically the whole time he was trying to find a way to get his hands onto the power of the founding titan, and then he finds that unless you're royal, you can't really use that power. So I mean, that kind of, I guess, goes along with the lines of, if you were a you know someone who had royal blood and Ackerman blood, like, I guess for all intents and purposes would be like if Historia and Levi had a child, then that child would have royal blood and Ackerman blood. Um, and that child may be able to activate the Ackerman part of their blood to become a very dangerous killing machine. We also get flashbacks of Kenny finding Levi after his mother died, and raising him, teaching him how to fight with a sword, how to deal with people down in the the undercity. And then Levi eventually makes his way into the scout regiment, of course, and works with Ervin. And Kenny never told Levi that he was his uncle until that moment when Kenny's dying and Levi's there, and he gives him the final syringe that has more of the Titan serum in it, that that Levi can then do with what he pleases. I would kind of think that, like, the Ackermans probably can't turn into Titans, but if you're someone of royal blood and Ackerman blood, then maybe you can. So if Historia and Levi had a kid, which I'm pretty sure Historia's daughter is not Levi's daughter. I don't think so, because she's not married to Levi. Um, but like, if Historia and Levi had a child, then that child may have had the willpower and the wherewithal to be able to like, if they inherited the founding Titan, like, either they were the one that then ate Aaron, or like Historia ate Aaron at one point, and then the kid ate Historia, which just sounds so wrong, and got that power. Then possibly that Titan, that kid, that ruler may actually, if they had trained in the Ackerman, trained, had their Ackerman blood awakened and everything, maybe they would have the ability to be able to defy the first king and actually be able to you know destroy the Titans beyond the walls, or at the very least convert them back into humans and make things better. But I'm sure there's a fanfic of that out there somewhere. That would surprise me if there wasn't. Um, but we get that. So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's a thing. Maybe someone else did a theory about that. Like, if Levi and Historia had a kid, could their kid defy the first kings, the 145th kings, rule, that curse? Would they be able to defy that and, stop it and break that curse? Um, Maybe. I don't know. That would be an Isayama question of, if that happened, would that work? Maybe. Um, but we also, we get all the scouts, or, it's like, it's 2 months later. Historia, she's queen. She has set up kind of an orphanage on this farm. And they, the people refer to her as like the cattle farming goddess. As it's like, it's an endearment, because they very much like what she's done. She's taken all of these orphans in on this farm from both the underground and other ones that were orphaned from, like, probably what happened with, like, Shiganshina and other stuff like that, and gives them a place where they can come and live and be safe. And so she does that, and she spends a lot of time there. And it's been about a month or so since she, as I said, it's 2 months since Aaron first found out that he was a Titan. It's been about 2 months since then. It's about a month since Historia became queen. And Aaron's been practicing with having his hardening ability, with being able to generate the armor around him, so he can use that in fighting, but he can also use that as a way for them to plug up the wall in Shiganshina, so they can be able to get through the wall or get into the basement and everything without being attacked by Titans at that point in time. Ha ha ha, attacked by Titan. And, so he's been working on that. They also come up with different ways for them to be able to use a lot of that crystal to, they use it as lights around the city because it gives us a way of powering it. And then they use it as a way to build like this contraption that allows them to like, lure Titans in with only like one scout there. And then they can lure the Titan in to the point where the Titan gets their head inside this trap, and then they can drop something on the Titan and then destroy the nape of the neck that way, as opposed to having to, risk a scout, all that time. Um, which, saves lives, prevents less scouts from dying, which is a good thing, or even prevents less garrison people from dying if they're the ones that are there at that time. Gives them better ways of dealing with that, so they're able to protect themselves from the Titans better, which is also a good idea. But like when Historia had been, just after she'd been made queen, and like just after Levi finds out about, Kenny had been his uncle and everything, he Historia and the others are walking down the hallway, and they're trying to convince her, you don't have to punch Levi. And like Levi's there. They meet Levi in the hallway, and Historia just goes, ah, and she goes over to him and she punches him. She goes, ha, did that hurt? And Levi just kind of like smiles and shakes his head, and he's like, thanks for that. And it was like one of the rare times where we get, Levi happy. Um, and like all the rest of the group, like when Historia punched Levi, all the rest of the group were like, ah! And because it's just like, like, you go, girl, because it's just happy. But like at the beginning of the season, we have like all of them are kind of at like this cabin, where they're trying to keep Aaron and Historia safe because they know that Aaron and Historia are in danger. But they keep them there, and they're all trying to clean and everything, and like Aaron's trying to keep everybody cleaning like they're supposed to. He's like, you don't understand it, Captain Levi is gonna want this place spotless. And they're like, he's trying to get them to clean more, and like they're just like, it's not a problem. And then Levi shows up, and he like checks for dust or whatever, and he's like, can I give them like this look of, I'm disappointed in you, I thought I gave you enough time. And like Aaron's like, oh god, we're in trouble, and all the others are like, eh. I'm like, oh good Christ. But they're all getting ready now to be able to go and make their way to Shigachina district now, and it's like the night before that or whatever. As I said, Connie went and visited his mom in the village, and as long as you don't get too close to her to a degree, she probably wouldn't be able to cause any damage to anyone. They may have maybe moved her into a more comfortable position than just, laying in the house, laying in her own destroyed house. They may have put her in a more comfortable position. She probably still can't move, but, they're probably not torturing her the way that they did the other two, as I said. And, Aaron had been looking through a lot of his father's memories and trying to figure out who this scout that his father had known, and he was trying to figure out who that was. And then someone mentions, someone had mentioned that was like, oh well, what about someone had mentioned the commandant, and Aaron just flips in his head, and he's like, that's who that was. That's who that was that I saw in the flashbacks. The commandant that was like the one that was training them, that was the bald guy way back, that was training them when they were recruits and everything. And they go and find him, and they talk to him, and he explains that, well, yes, I knew your father and I knew your mother, and that I actually found your father one day outside of the walls. And he had no memory. He knew that his name was, Grisha Yeager. He knew that he was a doctor, but he had no idea how he'd gotten outside of the walls, and he had no idea anything else about him. And, I brought him into the walls, and, he had to go through some, some scrutiny, of course. And then he ended up, he watched as, Grisha met Carla, and then he remembers meeting Aaron. He watched, them get married, and then he remembers meeting Aaron when he was a baby, and he had like snapped at Carla about something, that the commandant had like snapped at Carla about thinking, that, he had thought that he was like special, but then, he's like snapping at Carla for thinking that, Aaron was maybe special or whatever the case was. And, he goes, so we get a bit more of like Grisha's backstory, how Grisha had like healed all of them from the plague and made them all better. and had done all this great stuff that had helped the Eldians and the walls quite a bit. And you know he had maybe he'd been someone that had gotten Grisha, information on the Reese family. I don't know if they ever state that. But it's Grisha, we get the Grisha, more of Grisha's backstory, of course, and how, you know, we, combined with the flashbacks that we get from the rest of Aaron's memory with, Grisha, taking him after what happened, after Rose fell, Grisha taking Aaron into the woods. And, he's like, okay, so you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And then, I'm going to inject you with this. And then you're going to, I don't think he told him he was going to turn into a Titan, but he's like, okay, I'm going to inject you with this. You'll turn into a Titan and then you'll eat me. And then you'll wake up and then you're going to have to, you can avenge your mother. You can do all that. And you're going to have to find your way to the basement. Now, I don't remember specifically if like Grisha was able to use like the founding Titan's power in order to like manipulate Aaron's memory so Aaron didn't remember that he ate his father. I don't remember if he was able to do that or not. I could be wrong and he didn't do that, but I'm not sure. But like, he changed Aaron into a Titan and then he had him eat him, which is still disgusting and disturbing. And, Aaron wakes up and he doesn't remember what happens. He has the key and then, he passed out again. And then the Commandant, who was not the Commandant at the time, found Aaron and then he took him back to the shelter where he put him back with Mikasa and Armin because he probably would have seen them with Mikasa and Armin if him and Grisha were friends for so long, and we just get we get more of that backstory there for oh well, Grisha did this and yeah, he saved a lot of people, but then he also killed he killed Frida Reese, he killed Rod Reese's wife and the rest of his children, his eldest son, and then he had like two other sons, and then I think he had a daughter, and he killed all of them. And of course, we find out that kind of leads into, of course, because that happens when the wall falls the first time when Shiganshina district happens, and when wall Rose falls. I think it's Rose, Maria, and then Sheena. I think were the order for the walls. This took longer than I anticipated, but I'm almost finished. With flashbacks, with memories of season 2 or 3.1, whatever, part 1. And, Rod, after what had happened with his, wife and his family and everything, which, you can't blame him for being in grief. He just watched his, his wife and all of his children, watched his wife and all of his children die right in front of him, and he couldn't do anything. And watch that power get taken from his family as Grisha leaves. And what he does is he goes to the farm where, Historia is living with her mother, and he explains it was like, well, I'm your father, Historia, and now you and your mother are going to come and live with me. And, well, he needed an heir. And, I think it's Kenny that shows up with a bunch of the MPs or whatever. And they're like, well, Lord Reese and everything, this, it's complete coincidence that you were here, this woman and this girl, and, they slit, Historia's mother's throat right in front of her. And Historia's, like the last words that Historia's mother says to her, basically, it's like, I wish you had never been born, or, that whole thing again, before she dies and before she's killed. And then, Rod makes the deal with the MPs. It was like, how about Historia joins the Scouts instead under a new identity? Just no claim to the Reese family or the throne or anything like that, but she has to go and be a Scout. And, her name will be Krista Lenz from now on. And, she goes with it because she doesn't have any other choice in the matter. And, she takes up that name, and then that's where she meets Amir and meets everybody else. And, we get a lot of that, unfortunately, where it's like, yeah, not really a lot of the characters have, happy childhoods. Because, like, Armin's parents, died when he was a kid, and then he lost his, his grandfather was part of supposedly the ability to retake Shiganshina district, which, didn't do anything except get a lot of them killed. Because it was, thinning the herd, out of the, Amir didn't have a happy backstory. Krista definitely, or Historia didn't. Um, Mikasa didn't. Aaron definitely didn't. Um, you know, maybe some of the other members of the scouts, or even some of the other ones that were part of like the MP later on, maybe they had some bits where they were like, okay, well, I'm happy with this, or I'm good with this, this is a good life for me, or this was a good childhood. And I don't remember if we ever find that much about Jean's backstory. I don't know if we do or not, or if we do, I haven't gotten that far in the story yet. um we learn a little bit about Sasha's backstory and Connie's backstory in the previous season. So, we get some more backstory development for the characters, more world building, of course, with finding out more about the founding Titan. And now, of course, going into season 3.3, part 2, that's when they're going to go try and retake Shiganshina district. We get some flashes of, in the final 2 episodes, we find out that, Reiner tried to fight the Beast Titan, so we kind of get Zeke for the first time. Well, we kind of saw him like at the end of season 2, but now we get a little bit more of an introduction to him. We don't find out exactly who he is, but like Bertolt and Reiner had wanted to go and try to save Annie, and like he fought the Beast Titan, and the Beast Titan won. And we don't know if his name's Zeke yet, but the Beast Titan, he's like, well, I won, so we're going to do this first, and then we'll worry about saving Annie. I don't particularly think Zeke cares about saving Annie, beyond the fact of making sure that they're able to bring back that power of the female Titan to, the Marleyans, but we'll see what happens with that. I know that Annie's still sitting in like that crystal cocoon type thing, and I know that she does for a while, and I think she's there during the whole time skip. But I know at some point she gets freed from it, but I have actually not looked into how that happens. I'm gonna probably try to wait and just see what happens with that when I get to that in the anime. So I'll probably do another video for season 3, part 2. This one's, almost at an hour and 15 minutes by the time I'm finished with the actual recording. It might get edited down a little bit, but that's what I got. So that's what I got for Animanda on Titan Part 3. So I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe I thought of a theory that someone else hadn't thought of before, but given the amount of people that have watched Attack on Titan, I'm pretty sure they have. So again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. The world is full of pain and suffering, so you should live in a way to be helpful and loved by everyone.